The morning sun had barely crept over the Missouri horizon when Emily Rose Patterson felt the first blow land across her shoulders. She'd overslept again, exhausted from scrubbing floors until midnight, and her stepmother Margaret's switch found its mark with practiced precision. "Lazy girl, the chickens won't feed themselves." Margaret's shrill voice cut through the thin walls of their ramshackle home on the outskirts of Cedar Creek, a town so small it barely warranted a dot on any map. Emily bit her lip to keep from crying out. At 18, she'd learned that tears only brought more punishment. She scrambled from her straw mattress in the corner of the kitchen, her bare feet hitting the cold wooden floor. Through the cracked window, she could see other girls her age walking arm in arm with their bows toward the general store, their Sunday dresses clean and pressed. Emily owned 2 dresses, one for work, one for church, both patched so many times the original fabric was barely visible. "Yes, ma'am," she whispered, pulling her threadbare shawl around her shoulders as she headed for the door. "And don't you be making eyes at any of them boys in town," Margaret called after her. "Ain't no decent man gonna want a girl with no dowry and nothing to offer. You're lucky your father keeps a roof over your ungrateful head." The words stung more than the switch. Emily knew what the townspeople whispered about her: Samuel Patterson's burden of a daughter. Too poor to marry off. Too plain to catch a man's eye without money to sweeten the deal. Some of the crueler gossips added another detail that made her cheeks burn with shame, still untouched at 18. When most girls her age already had babies on their hips, her father, Samuel, sat slumped at the kitchen table, a half-empty bottle of whiskey beside his coffee cup despite the early hour. He didn't look up as she passed, hadn't really looked at her since her mother died 6 years ago. Sometimes Emily wondered if he saw Catherine's ghost when he looked at her. The same auburn hair, the same green eyes, the same stubborn chin that had once made him smile instead of reach for another drink. The chickens scattered as she entered the coop, spreading the meager handful of feed across the dirt. The birds were scrawny things, much like everything else on their failing farm. Samuel had been a decent farmer once, before grief and whiskey took hold. Now the fields lay fallow, the fences rotted, and creditors came knocking with increasing frequency. Emily was collecting the few eggs when she heard voices from the house, her father's slurred tones and another man's voice, smooth and calculating. Through the kitchen window, she glimpsed a stranger in a black suit, far too fine for Cedar Creek. He had the look of a traveling man, with pomaded hair and a gold watch chain across his vest. Good, strong stock," the stranger was saying. "Healthy girl, you say? Untouched?" "Pure as morning snow," Samuel replied, and Emily's stomach turned at the eager note in his voice. Never been courted proper? Margaret's seen to that. The ladies out west prefer their help. Unspoiled. Makes them more malleable. Easier to train for household duties. The stranger pulled out a leather purse, counting out bills onto the table. $50 now, 50 when she boards the train. Emily's hands trembled, eggs falling from her apron to smash on the ground. They were talking about her, selling her like livestock. "When?" Samuel asked, his eyes fixed on the money. "Tomorrow morning. The train leaves at dawn for St. Joseph. Then she'll take the wagon train from there. Her new employer is eager to have her in Arizona territory by month's end." Arizona? The word might as well have been China for all Emily knew of it. Desert land. She'd heard. Indians and outlaws and scorching sun that killed men in their tracks. "You tell her she's going to work for a respectable widower," the stranger continued, sliding a paper across the table. "Needs a housekeeper and cook, maybe a governess for his children. Make her understand it's a position of respect. These mail-order arrangements work best when the girls think they're choosing their own fate." Samuel's signature scratched across the paper, sealing Emily's fate with ink and whiskey-stained fingers. She ran then, eggs forgotten, racing toward the small cemetery where her mother lay buried. The wooden cross had weathered gray, but Emily had painted beloved wife and mother in careful letters that spring. She fell to her knees in the dry grass, pressing her palms against the earth. "Mama, what do I do?" she whispered. "He's sending me away. selling me to some stranger in the desert. But the grave offered no answers, only silence and the whisper of prairie wind through the grass. That evening, Samuel presented the arrangement as if it were a gift. "Got you a position out west," he announced over their meager supper of cornbread and beans. "Respectable widower needs a housekeeper. Good opportunity for a girl like you." "A girl like me?" Emily's voice came out smaller than intended. Margaret snorted. "A girl with no prospects and no dowry. You should be grateful, mister. Thornton says the gentleman is well established, owns property. You'll have your own room, proper wages." "Mr. Thornton." Emily looked between them. The man in the black suit. "He arranges these positions," Samuel said, not meeting her eyes. "Matches good Christian girls with households that need them. You leave tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" The room spun. "But I haven't prepared. I don't even know this man's name." "His name is—" Samuel faltered, looking to Margaret. "Does it matter?" Margaret snapped. "You'll do as you're told, or you can find yourself sleeping in the street. Your choice." But Emily knew she had no choice at all. Where would she go? She had no money, no family beyond these walls, no skills beyond cooking and cleaning and tending chickens. The respectable families in town would never hire Samuel Patterson's daughter, not with his reputation for drink and debt. That night, she packed her few belongings in her mother's old carpet bag: 2 dresses, a worn Bible, her mother's wedding ring hidden in a handkerchief, and a small daguerreotype of her parents from happier days. Margaret watched from the doorway, ensuring she took nothing of value. "You'll thank us someday," her stepmother said. "A girl needs a husband, and if you serve this gentleman well, perhaps he'll find you a match among the ranch hands. Better than growing old here, dependent on charity." Emily didn't sleep. She sat by her small window, watching the stars and trying to imagine what awaited her in Arizona territory. Perhaps the widower would be kind. Perhaps his children would need a gentle hand. Perhaps she could build a new life far from Margaret's switch and her father's empty eyes. When Samuel stumbled into her room before dawn, reeking of whiskey, she was dressed and ready. He pressed a small cloth purse into her hands. "A few coins. Nothing more. Your mother would want you to have this," he mumbled. And for a moment, she saw a flicker of the man he used to be. Then it was gone, and he was shuffling away, leaving her to face her fate alone. "Mister." Thornton arrived as the sky began to lighten, his wagon already loaded with 2 other girls, one crying silently, the other staring straight ahead with dead eyes. Emily climbed aboard, her carpet bag clutched to her chest, and didn't look back as Cedar Creek disappeared into the morning mist. "Ladies, Mister," Thornton said as they reached the train station, "you're embarking on a grand adventure. The West needs good women to civilize it, to bring Christian values to the frontier. You should be proud." But as Emily boarded the train, the first of many that would carry her across the vast continent, she felt no pride, only a cold dread settling in her stomach like a stone, and the certainty that whatever awaited her in Arizona, it would not be the respectable position her father had promised. The train whistle shrieked, and Emily Rose Patterson left behind everything she'd ever known, sold for $100 to a stranger whose name her own father couldn't remember. The journey west stretched endlessly before Emily, each mile taking her further from everything familiar. The train to St. Joseph gave way to a cramped stagecoach, then to a wagon train that crawled across the prairie like a dying beetle. By the time they reached the New Mexico territory, her hands were blistered from gripping the wagon sides, and her dresses were stained with dust that no amount of beating could remove. "Mister." Thornton had long since handed her off to another agent, a wiry man named Collins, who spoke little and smiled less. The other girls had been delivered to their positions at various stops along the way, leaving Emily alone with her growing dread. She'd written 3 letters to her father during the journey, but had no way of knowing if they'd ever reach Cedar Creek, or if he'd care enough to read them. The landscape changed from rolling plains to harsh desert, punctuated by towering red rocks that looked like God's own monuments. The heat was unlike anything Emily had ever experienced, dry and crushing, sucking the moisture from her lips and leaving her perpetually parched despite the rationed water. "Almost there, miss." Collins finally spoke as they approached a small settlement on the third week of travel. "Copper Springs. That's where your employer will collect you." Copper Springs was barely more than a collection of wooden buildings huddled against the desert wind. A few shops, a saloon, a small church with a crooked cross. Apache territory. She'd heard the wagon drivers whisper, though the town itself seemed populated entirely by miners, ranchers, and the hard women who serviced them. Collins stopped the wagon outside the general store, helping her down with an unusual gentleness. "Wait here," he instructed, disappearing inside. Emily stood in the dusty street, carpetbag at her feet, trying to smooth her travel-worn appearance. Perhaps her new employer would arrive in a proper carriage. Perhaps his children were waiting at a respectable house with curtains in the windows and flowers in the garden. The minutes stretched. Townspeople passed, giving her curious glances. A woman in a garish red dress smirked from the saloon doorway. "Another mail-order bride," she called to her companion. "Wonder how long this one'll last." Emily's cheeks burned, but she kept her chin high. She was here for respectable employment, not whatever that woman implied. When Collins emerged, his face was grim. Behind him walked the largest man Emily had ever seen. He stood at least 6.5 feet tall, with broad shoulders that strained against his simple cotton shirt. His skin was sun-bronzed, his hair black as midnight and hanging past his shoulders. But it was his eyes that made her step backward, dark and fathomless, holding a sadness so profound it seemed to pull the light from the air around him. An Apache. Her employer had sent an Apache to collect her. "This is Jake," Collins said, using what was clearly not the man's real name. "He'll take you to your position." "I don't understand," Emily stammered. "Where is Mr. the widower? Where are the children?" Collins was already climbing back onto his wagon. "Transaction's complete, miss. Best go along quiet-like." The Apache, Jake, studied her with those hollow eyes. When he spoke, his English was careful, accented. "Come, long ride." "No." The word escaped before Emily could stop it. "There's been a mistake. I meant to work for a respectable gentleman. A widower with children who need. You come with me." His voice held no threat, only a tired certainty. "Bought and paid for. You belong to me now." The world tilted. Emily's knees buckled, and she would have fallen if the Apache hadn't caught her arm with surprising gentleness. His hands were calloused but careful, and he released her as soon as she was steady. "Please," she whispered. I'm here to be a housekeeper, a governess." Something flickered in his eyes. Perhaps pity, perhaps understanding. "White man's lies," he said simply. "You come. I will not hurt you." What choice did she have? Collins was already disappearing down the road. The townspeople watched with a mixture of pity and indifference. She could run, but where? Into the desert to die of thirst? Into the saloon to become like the woman in the red dress? The Apache lifted her carpetbag as if it weighed nothing and began walking toward a horse tethered at the edge of town. It was a beautiful animal, painted in brown and white patches, with intelligent eyes that tracked Emily's approach. "You ride," he said, helping her mount with the same careful touch. "Hold tight." He swung up behind her, his presence solid and warm against her back. Emily had never been this close to a man before, and every instinct screamed at her to flee. But his arms came around her to take the reins, creating a protective cage that somehow felt more safe than threatening. They rode in silence as Copper Springs disappeared behind them. The land grew wilder, more desolate. Red rocks gave way to scrub brush and cacti, then to pine forests as they climbed into the mountains. Emily's fear gradually gave way to exhaustion, and she found herself leaning back against the solid wall of his chest, too tired to maintain her rigid posture. The sun was setting when they finally stopped at a small cabin nestled against a hillside. It was roughly built but sturdy, with a stone chimney and a covered porch. A few chickens pecked in the yard, and she could see a vegetable garden struggling against the harsh climate. The Apache, She still couldn't think of him as Jake, dismounted and helped her down. Her legs nearly gave out after hours in the saddle, and again he steadied her with those careful hands. "You're home now," he said, gesturing to the cabin. "My prison, you mean—" The words came out bitter, angry. He studied her for a long moment. "Prison is losing everyone you love to white soldiers. Prison is watching your land taken, your people scattered." He turned away. "This is just a house." Emily followed him inside, her anger faltering in the face of his quiet grief. The cabin was simple but clean, one main room with a fireplace, a rough-hewn table, shelves lined with preserves and dried goods. A ladder led to what must be a loft, and a curtain separated what might be a small bedroom. "You sleep there," he said, pointing to the curtained area. "I sleep outside." "Outside?" She looked at him in surprise. "Until you're not afraid." He moved to the fireplace, beginning to build a fire with practiced efficiency. "Hungry?" Emily realized she hadn't eaten since dawn. Her stomach answered for her, growling loudly in the quiet cabin. The ghost of a smile crossed his face, the first hint of warmth she'd seen from him. He prepared a simple meal, cornbread, beans, dried meat that might have been venison. Emily ate mechanically, her mind racing. When she finished, he cleared the dishes without a word, his movements graceful despite his size. "What is your real name?" she asked suddenly. He paused at the wash basin. "Jake is enough. It's not your name, though Collins just called you that because white men cannot speak Apache names." He turned to face her. "You want to know my name? Learn to speak it proper first." There was no malice in the words, just a quiet challenge. Emily felt her spine straighten. "Then teach me." This time his smile was real, transforming his face for just a moment. "Maybe first you rest. Tomorrow, work begins." He showed her the bedroom, barely large enough for a narrow bed and trunk, but clean and private. A small window looked out toward the mountains, and someone, him, had placed a vase with dried wildflowers on the sill. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded and left, closing the curtain behind him. Emily heard the front door open and close, then silence. She peered out the window and saw him settling onto the porch with a blanket, his rifle across his knees. Guarding her, or guarding against her escape? Emily unpacked slowly, hanging her 2 dresses on pegs, placing her mother's Bible on the small shelf. The daguerreotype of her parents she tucked under the pillow, one piece of home in this strange new world. She lay awake for hours, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the wilderness. Coyotes howled in the distance. An owl called from somewhere nearby. Once, she heard the man on the porch shift position, the boards creaking under his weight. She should be terrified. She'd been sold to an Apache warrior, taken to a cabin miles from civilization, with no way to escape and no one to help her. But somehow, inexplicably, she felt safer than she had in years. He'd said he wouldn't hurt her, and something in those sad eyes made her believe him. As sleep finally claimed her, Emily's last thought was a question. What sorrow had carved those lines around his eyes, had put that weight in his voice when he spoke of soldiers and loss? She would learn, in time, that some prisons were made of wood and stone, and others were made of memories too painful to forget. The days fell into a rhythm that Emily fought against at first, then gradually accepted. She woke each morning to find fresh water by her door and the fire already burning. Her captor, she still couldn't think of him any other way, would be gone, hunting or tending to tasks she couldn't fathom. She cooked, cleaned, mended what needed mending, all while plotting an escape that grew more impossible with each passing day. The wilderness stretched endlessly in every direction. Even if she could steal the horse, she had no idea which way led to civilization. The few times she'd ventured beyond the clearing, she'd gotten turned around within minutes, the trees all looking the same, the mountains offering no guidance. On the 4th day, she found a book tucked into a corner shelf, a water-stained Bible with notes in the margins. Some were in English, written in a careful hand. Luke 6:27, "But I say unto you which hear, Love your enemies. Others were in what she assumed was Apache, the letters strange and flowing. You read? She jumped, not having heard him enter. He moved like a shadow despite his size, appearing and disappearing with unnerving silence. Of course I read, Emily said, defensive. My mother taught me. He crossed to the shelf, pulling down another book, this one in Apache. This was my mother's. She learned from missionaries. His fingers traced the worn leather cover with unexpected tenderness. Before soldiers came. What happened? The question escaped before Emily could stop it. His face closed off, the brief openness vanishing like smoke. You want learn Apache? Start here. He set the book on the table and left again. Emily stared at the book, torn between curiosity and stubborn resistance. Learning his language felt like accepting her fate, like admitting she belonged here. But the empty hours stretched before her, and the strange symbols called to her mother's daughter, the girl who'd always loved words. She began slowly, matching sounds she'd heard him speak to symbols on the page. When he returned that evening with a rabbit for dinner, she tried a simple greeting she'd puzzled out. The look of shock on his face was worth her hours of effort. Then, to her amazement, he smiled, a real smile that transformed his stern features into something almost boyish. Terrible accent, he said, but his eyes were warm. Like this. He repeated the phrase, and she tried again, earning a nod of approval. That night, he ate dinner inside with her instead of taking his plate to the porch. They sat in companionable silence, the fire crackling between them. A week passed. 2. Emily's hands grew calloused from new work, gathering kindling, hauling water, learning to skin the game he brought home. Her skin darkened under the mountain sun, and her appetite returned with the physical labor. She still slept with one ear alert for his footsteps, still flinched when he moved too quickly, but the sharp edge of fear had dulled to wary caution. Then came the night everything changed. Emily had decided to venture to the stream for water, despite his warnings to wait for his return. The path seemed clear enough, the sound of water guiding her through the trees. She'd made it halfway when she heard the rattle, a sound that froze her blood and sent primitive terror racing down her spine. The snake lay coiled on the path ahead, its diamond patterns beautiful and deadly in the dappled sunlight. Emily stepped backward slowly, remembering her mother's lessons about giving rattlers space, but her heel caught on a root, sending her tumbling backward. Pain shot through her ankle as the snake struck, fangs piercing through her boot leather. She screamed, a sound that echoed through the canyon and sent birds fleeing from the trees. The world began to spin, darkness creeping in at the edges of her vision. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate, the burning spreading from her ankle up her calf. Then he was there, crashing through the brush like an avenging spirit, in one fluid motion. He scooped her into his arms and began running back toward the cabin. Emily had never seen anyone move so fast while carrying another person, his breathing steady even as her weight must have strained his strength. Stay awake, he commanded, his voice harsh with something that sounded like fear. Look at me, stay awake. He set her on the table, pulling a knife from his belt. For one terrified moment, she thought he meant to cut off her foot. Instead, he sliced through her boot leather with practiced precision, exposing the angry red puncture wounds. What happened next would haunt her dreams for weeks. He knelt before her, pressing his mouth to the wound and drawing out the venom with powerful suctions. His hands held her calf steady as she writhed in pain, his grip gentle but unbreakable. Between each draw, he spat the poison onto the floor, his face grim with determination. Emily had never experienced such intimate contact with a man. Even through the haze of pain and poison, she was acutely aware of his hands on her skin, his breath against her ankle, the intensity of his focus on saving her life. When he finally raised his head, his lips were swollen, traces of her blood on his chin. Must clean now, he said, his words slightly slurred. Will hurt. He was right. The whiskey he poured over the wound sent fresh fire through her leg. Emily bit down on the leather strip he offered, tears streaming down her face. Through it all, He worked with steady hands, cleaning and binding the wound with strips torn from one of his own shirts. "Sleep now," he said when it was done, lifting her as easily as a child. But instead of carrying her to her room, he placed her in his own bed, a simple frame with a mattress that smelled of pine and leather and something uniquely him. "No," Emily protested weakly. "Your bed. Safer here. I watch." He pulled a chair beside the bed, settling in with his rifle across his knees. Sleep. The fever came in waves. Emily drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes burning, sometimes freezing. Through it all, he was there, cool cloths on her forehead, strong hands holding her steady when the shaking became too violent. Once, in the depths of the night, she felt him stroke her hair back from her face with infinite tenderness. "Don't leave me," she whispered, not sure if she was talking to him or to the memory of her mother. "Never leave," he answered, and she believed him. By morning, the fever had broken. Emily woke to find him slumped in the chair, exhaustion written in every line of his body. His shirt was stained with her sweat and blood, his face drawn with worry. But he smiled when he saw her eyes open, clear and aware. "You stayed," she said wonderfully. "Said I would." He leaned forward, checking her forehead for fever. "Hungry?" She nodded, then caught his hand as he stood to go. "Thank you. You saved my life." He looked down at their joined hands, hers so pale and small in his dark, calloused one. "My name," he said quietly, "is Dakota, means friend to everyone, in language of Sioux. My mother, she was Sioux. Father was Apache. Dakota." Emily tested the name, liking how it felt on her tongue. "I'm Emily Rose Patterson. Emily Rose." He said it like a prayer, then gently freed his hand. "I make food now." As she watched him move around the kitchen, Emily felt something shift inside her chest. This man, this Apache warrior who'd bought her like cattle, had risked his own life to save hers. He'd held her through the fever, tended her with a gentleness that belied his fearsome size. The tears came suddenly, unexpectedly, not tears of fear or anger, but of something far more complicated. Gratitude, yes, but also shame for how she'd thought of him, how she'd planned to flee at the first opportunity. "Why cry?" He was beside her instantly, concern creasing his brow. I was so afraid of you," Emily admitted. "I thought you were a savage, that you would—" She couldn't finish, couldn't voice the terrible things she'd imagined. His face went carefully blank. "White people always think this. We are savage. They are civilized." He turned away. "They come to our lands with guns and disease. Take our children to schools where they beat them for speaking our words. Kill our women and elders. Then call us murderers when we fight back. Dakota, you know why I live here alone?" His voice was steady, but she could hear the pain beneath. "My village is ash. My family is bones. Soldiers came while men were hunting. Said we stole cattle, but we had no cattle. Just women and children and old ones." Emily's hand pressed to her mouth, horror filling her chest. "I come back to find my mother, my sisters, all dead. My woman, we would marry in spring. They did things to her before—" He stopped, his hands clenched into fists. "So yes, I am savage. I killed soldiers that day, many soldiers. They put bounty on my head. So I come here, where no one looks." The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of truth. Emily understood now the sadness in his eyes, the careful way he moved around her, the distance he maintained. "I'm sorry," she whispered, knowing how inadequate the words were. "I'm so sorry." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw not a savage but a man carrying grief too heavy for one soul to bear. "You not sorry for being afraid," he said finally. "Fear is wisdom sometimes, but you see now, we are both prisoners here. You of circumstance, me of memory." Emily struggled to sit up, ignoring the pain in her ankle. "We don't have to be prisoners. We could be—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Friends?" The smile that crossed his face was sad but real. "Friends," he nodded. "Yes, this would be good." That night, he ate dinner inside again. teaching her more Apache words as they shared the simple meal. When darkness fell, he helped her back to her own bed, his touch careful but no longer distant. "Dakota," she called as he turned to go. "Thank you for telling me about your family." He paused in the doorway, his broad frame silhouetted against the firelight. "Thank you for listening." Emily rose. As she drifted towards sleep, Emily realized the cabin no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a shelter, a place where two wounded souls might find refuge from a world that had been cruel to them both. Outside, she heard him settle onto the porch as always, a standing guard against dangers both real and remembered. But tonight, the sound brought comfort instead of fear, and she slept peacefully, knowing she was protected by a friend. The mountain mornings grew colder as autumn approached, and Emily woke one day to find frost on the window and a new gift on her bedside table, a wooden comb, intricately carved with small birds and flowering vines. She ran her fingers over the delicate work, marveling at how hands so large could create something so fine. She found Dakota by the woodpile, splitting logs with rhythmic precision. He'd shed his shirt despite the chill, and Emily found herself noticing the play of muscles across his back, the grace in his movements. When had she stopped seeing him as her captor and started seeing him as a man? "The comb is beautiful," she said in Apache, her accent still rough but improving. He paused mid-swing, glancing over his shoulder with that rare smile that transformed his face. "Your Apache gets better. Soon speak like true person." "Teach me more." He set down the axe, wiping sweat from his brow. "Today we hunt together. You strong enough now?" Emily's ankle had healed well over the past 3 weeks, leaving only faint scars where the snake had struck. She'd been restless, confined to the cabin and immediate clearing, while Dakota disappeared for hours into the wilderness. "Women hunt in your culture?" she asked, surprised. "Apache women are warriors too. My mother could track deer better than any man. My grandmother fought Mexican soldiers when they came for our children." Pride colored his voice. "You think white women are stronger because they sit in houses and faint at the sight of blood?" Emily laughed, a real laugh that bubbled up from somewhere deep inside. "Fair point. Teach me to be a warrior then." They spent the morning in the forest, Dakota showing her how to read signs in the earth. A broken twig here, a partial print there. He moved silently despite his size, and Emily tried to copy his footfalls, earning approving nods when she avoided stepping on dry leaves. "See here?" He knelt by a stream, pointing to marks in the mud. "Deer, female with young. Came to drink at dawn." Emily knelt beside him, their shoulders almost touching. "How can you tell it was dawn?" "Tracks still sharp, sun not dry them yet." His hand hovered over the prints, not quite touching. She nervous. See how prints are deep here. Light there. Something spooked her. What?" He pointed to another set of tracks. "Cat, mountain lion hunting too." Emily shivered, suddenly aware of how wild this place truly was. Dakota noticed, his hand settling briefly on her shoulder. "Lion won't bother us. I smell of death to them." His voice held dark humor. "Too many soldiers' blood on my hands." They followed the deer trail for another hour before Dakota held up his hand. Freezing. Through the trees, Emily glimpsed a young buck grazing in a small meadow. Dakota notched an arrow, his movements fluid and practiced, but instead of shooting, he handed the bow to Emily. "You try. I couldn't possibly—" "Try." His voice brooked no argument. He positioned himself behind her, his chest against her back, his arms coming around to guide her hands on the bow. Emily's breath caught at the contact, her heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with the hunt. "Breathe," he murmured near her ear. "In deep, out slow. Release with the breath." The arrow flew wide, startling the buck into flight. Emily expected mockery, but Dakota simply squeezed her shoulder. "Good first try. Tomorrow we practice more." They returned to find visitors at the cabin, 3 white men on horseback, their faces hard and suspicious. Emily recognized the type from town. Drifters, troublemakers, the kind who thought the law didn't reach this far into Apache territory. Well, the largest one said, tobacco juice staining his beard. What have we here? A white woman keeping house with a savage? Dakota stepped slightly in front of Emily, his hand moving casually to the knife at his belt. Leave, now. Don't think so, Chief. The man dismounted, his companions following suit. See, we heard tell of a pretty little thing got sold to an Apache. Figured she might be in need of rescue. I don't need rescue, Emily said firmly, moving to stand beside Dakota. The men laughed. Stockholm Syndrome, they call it, one said. When captives start thinking they love their captors, don't worry. Miss, we'll take good care of you. They advanced, and everything happened very quickly. The first man reached for Emily, and Dakota moved like lightning, his fist connecting with the man's jaw with a sickening crack. The second man drew his pistol, but Dakota's knife was already flying, striking the gun from his hand. The third tried to flank them, and Emily, without thinking, grabbed the splitting axe from the woodpile. Touch me and lose your hand, she snarled, surprising herself with the ferocity in her voice. The men regrouped, nursing wounds and wounded pride. This ain't over. The leader spat blood. Apache lover, you're worse than him. They rode off, but Emily knew they'd be back. Her hands shook as she set down the axe, reaction setting in. You fought, Dakota said, wonder in his voice. For me. For us, Emily corrected. They had no right. Her words were cut off as Dakota pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her in the first real embrace they'd shared. Emily stiffened for a moment, then melted into his warmth, her face pressed against his chest where she could hear his heart racing as fast as her own. Brave woman, he murmured into her hair. Warrior woman. That night, the approaching storm made the air electric with tension. Thunder rolled across the mountains, and rain began to fall in sheets. The roof, sturdy as it was, developed several leaks, water dripping onto Emily's bed and belongings. Come, Dakota said from her doorway. Sleep by fire tonight. Roof is better there. They dragged her mattress to the main room, positioning it near the hearth where the roof held strong. Dakota laid out his own bedroll nearby, close enough for propriety's sake but still maintaining distance. The storm intensified, lightning illuminating the cabin in stark flashes. Emily lay rigid, trying not to think about the men's threats, about what might happen when they returned with more friends. A particularly loud thunder crack made her gasp, and she heard Dakota shift on his bedroll. You afraid of storm? No, she said, then more honestly, yes, but not just the storm. He was quiet for a moment. They will come back. With more men. I know. I could take you to town, find way to send you back east. Safer for you. Emily sat up, peering at him through the firelit darkness. Is that what you want, to send me away? What I want does not matter. Your safety. Stop. She moved without thinking, crawling from her mattress to kneel beside his bedroll. What you want matters to me. Do you want me to go? The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows across his face. His hand reached up, hesitating just before touching her cheek. Emily rose, he said, her name a prayer on his lips. You know what I want, but I am Apache. You are white. The world will not... She silenced him by closing the distance, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was tentative, uncertain, but full of longing. For a heartbeat. He stayed frozen. Then his hand cupped the back of her head, and he was kissing her back with a desperation that spoke of loneliness and want and hope, all tangled together. When they parted, both breathing hard, Emily saw tears on his cheeks. First time since... He couldn't finish, but she understood. First kiss since his murdered bride-to-be? We don't have to, Emily started, but he pulled her down beside him, tucking her against his side with her head on his shoulder. Stay, he whispered. Just like this. Just be here. They lay together watching the fire die to embers, the storm gradually passing over the mountains. Emily traced patterns on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his skin. He stroked her hair with gentle fingers, occasionally murmuring words in Apache she didn't yet understand, but that sounded like endearments. Dakota, she said as sleep began to claim her. I don't want to go back east. I want to stay. With you. His arms tightened around her. Then you stay. We fight together. Live together. He pressed his lips to the crown of her head. Love together. The last word hung in the air between them. Acknowledged at last. Emily lifted her head to look at him, seeing in his dark eyes a reflection of her own feelings, unexpected, impossible, but undeniably real. Love, she agreed, and kissed him again. Outside, the storm moved on, leaving the world washed clean and new. Inside the cabin, two souls who had found each other across impossible odds held tight to their newfound connection, knowing that tomorrow would bring challenges. But tonight, for now, they had this warmth, safety, and the beginning of a love that would either save or destroy them both. The morning sun painted the mountains gold as Emily stirred in Dakota's arms, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar warmth surrounding her. Memory flooded back. The storm, the kiss, the quiet declarations in the firelight. She should feel ashamed, perhaps afraid of what she'd allowed to happen. Instead, she felt only a profound sense of rightness, as if all the broken roads of her life had led to this moment. Dakota was already awake, watching her with those dark eyes that no longer seemed hollow, but full of cautious wonder. "Good morning, warrior woman," he said softly in Apache. "Good morning," she replied in kind, pleased when he smiled at her improved pronunciation. They rose awkwardly, suddenly shy in the daylight. Emily busied herself with breakfast preparations while Dakota tended the fire, both hyper-aware of each other's movements. When their hands brushed reaching for the water bucket, they both froze, color rising in Emily's cheeks. "I should check the snares," Dakota said abruptly, fleeing to the safety of the forest. Emily watched him go, touching her lips where the memory of his kiss still lingered. Everything had changed in the span of a single storm, yet the world looked exactly the same. The mountains still rose majestically around their small clearing. The chickens still pecked in the yard. The garden still needed tending. She was pulling weeds from around the struggling tomato plants when she heard horses approaching. Her blood ran cold, expecting the men from yesterday. But the rider who emerged from the tree line was alone, a woman dressed in men's clothing, her gray hair braided Indian style, a rifle across her saddle. "You'd be the Patterson girl," the woman said without preamble, dismounting with surprising agility for her age. "Name's Ruth Clearwater. I run the trading post over the ridge." Emily straightened, wary but curious. "How do you know my name?" "Not much happens in these mountains I don't hear about." Ruth's weathered face crinkled into what might have been a smile, including when Jake Collins delivers a scared white girl to Dakota's doorstep. "Also heard about the trouble yesterday. Those boys won't be bothering you again. They lit out for California last night after I had a word with them." "You had a word?" "This," Ruth patted her rifle, and reminded them that Dakota is not the only one in these parts who's put men in the ground. They decided California gold sounded better than Arizona lead. Before Emily could respond, Dakota emerged from the forest, his hand moving instinctively to his knife before recognizing their visitor. "Ruth," he said, relaxing slightly. "Long time." "Too long, boy. You've been hiding up here like a wounded bear." Her sharp eyes moved between them, noting Emily's defensive position near Dakota. "Though I see you've found yourself some comfort." "It's not, we haven't," Emily stammered, her face burning. Ruth cackled. "Girl, I've been married to an Apache man for 30 years. I know that look. Nothing to be ashamed of. Love comes where it will, and it's a fool who turns it away because of what others might think." She rummaged in her saddlebags, producing a small cloth bundle. "Brought you something. Heard it was yours." "Emily," with trembling hands. Emily unwrapped the bundle to find her mother's wedding ring, the one she'd hidden in her carpet bag, which had disappeared with a Mr. Collins. "How?" "Collins stopped at my post to water his horses. I may have suggested he was carrying too much weight for the mountain passes. He decided to lighten his load." Ruth's smile was sharp as her rifle. Figured anything he was hauling for a girl he'd sold deserved to find its way back to her. Emily clutched the ring, tears spilling down her cheeks. Dakota's hand settled on her shoulder, steady and comforting. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet." Ruth's expression grew serious. "There's talk in Copper Springs. That snake Thornton's been bragging about his mail-order bride business. Says he's got papers proving the Apache bought you legal-like. Some folks are stirring up trouble about white women being sold to Indians. Let them come." Dakota said darkly, "Don't be a fool, boy. You can't fight the whole territory." Ruth looked at Emily. "You could make this easier on everyone. Go back to town, say you were rescued, get on a stage to anywhere else." "No." Emily's voice rang clear. "I'm staying." Ruth studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Your man makes good furniture, trades fair, never caused trouble that wasn't brought to him first. If you're choosing this, I'll stand by it, but it won't be easy." She remounted, turning her horse toward the trail. "I'll be back in a week with supplies. You need anything particular, girl?" "Fabric," Emily said impulsively. "And thread. Good thread." Ruth's grin was knowing. "Making yourself a wedding dress?" Emily's blush deepened, but she lifted her chin. "Maybe." After Ruth left, Dakota pulled Emily into the cabin, his face troubled. "She speaks truth. Trouble will come. Then we'll face it together." Emily took his hands in hers. "I'm not some fragile flower. Dakota, I've survived my father's neglect, my stepmother's cruelty. Being sold like livestock, I can survive narrow-minded fools too." He cupped her face gently. "Why? Why choose this hard path?" "Because somewhere between fear and understanding, I fell in love with you." The words came easier than she'd expected. "Because you see me, not the burden my father wanted gone or the servant Collins thought he was delivering, but me, Emily Rose, my Emily Rose," he murmured, and kissed her with a tenderness that made her knees weak. They spent the afternoon working side by side, building a new chicken coop to replace the ramshackle one. Dakota taught her Apache words for the tools they used, laughing when she confused hammer with thunder. Their hands touched often, helping, guiding, lingering. As evening approached, they prepared dinner together, moving around the small kitchen with increasing ease. Emily made cornbread while Dakota prepared venison stew, seasoning it with herbs she'd gathered from the mountainside. "In my village," he said as they worked, "when a man wished to court a woman, he would leave gifts at her family's door. Horses, furs, weapons to show he could provide. What did the woman do? If she accepted his suit, she would cook for him, bring him water, mend his clothes." He glanced at her sideways. "Things you have been doing." Emily's hands stilled on the cornmeal. "And after? If the courtship succeeded, the families would feast. The couple would receive blanket, special wedding blanket. They wrap themselves in it before all the people, showing they are one." His voice dropped. "Then they go to their own lodge." The air between them grew charged. Emily forced herself to keep working, though her hands trembled slightly. "We have no families, no blanket, no people to witness." "No," Dakota agreed quietly. "We have only ourselves and the mountains. Perhaps that is enough." After dinner, they sat by the fire as had become their custom. But tonight, Dakota pulled her against him, her back to his chest, his arms wrapped around her. Emily relaxed into his warmth, feeling safer than she ever had in her life. "Tell me about her," she said quietly. "The one you were to marry." Dakota's arms tightened briefly. Her name was Ayana. It means eternal bloom. She was full of laughter, always singing, made the best rabbit stew in the village. His voice grew rough. "She was with child when the soldiers came, our child." Emily turned in his arms, pressing her hand to his cheek. "I'm sorry, so sorry. For many moons, I wished to join them. Thought death would be easier than carrying this grief." He caught her hand, pressing it to his chest where his heart beat strong and steady. "Then you came, angry, frightened, fierce little warrior. You made me remember what it is to protect instead of only to grieve, to hope instead of only to endure. We've saved each other then," Emily whispered. They kissed then, deeper than before, hands exploring tentatively. When Dakota pulled back, his breathing ragged, Emily saw the question in his eyes. "Yes," she said simply. "I choose you. I choose this." He stood, lifting her easily in his arms. But instead of carrying her to the curtained bedroom, he brought her to his own space, the bed where he'd nursed her through snakebite fever, where she'd first seen past the warrior to the wounded man beneath. With infinite care and tenderness, they came together. Not as captor and captive, not as Apache and white, but simply as two souls finding solace in each other. Outside, coyotes sang to the rising moon, and the mountains stood eternal guard. Inside, Emily and Dakota created their own ceremony, their own vows written in touch and whispered endearments in 2 languages. Later, as they lay entwined, Emily traced the scars on Dakota's chest, each one a story of survival. He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "My Emily Rose," he murmured against her palm. "My wife, my husband," she replied, and knew that whatever papers or ceremonies the world might require, in this moment, in this place, it was true. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be those who called their union unholy, who would try to tear them apart. But tonight, they were simply 2 people who had found love in the most unlikely place. And that was miracle enough, as sleep claimed them. Emily's last coherent thought was that she'd traveled across a continent expecting to find servitude and had discovered something far more precious. A home, a partner, a love worth fighting for. And fight she would, with all the fierce determination of a woman who had learned to be a warrior. The weeks that followed were the happiest Emily had known since her mother's death. She and Dakota fell into the rhythms of a true partnership, hunting together, building together, creating a life that defied the expectations of both their peoples. Emily's Apache improved daily, while Dakota's English grew more fluent through their evening conversations by the fire. Ruth Clearwater became a regular visitor, bringing supplies and news from the outside world. Through her, Emily learned that her story had spread throughout the territory, twisted into various versions depending on who told it. Some painted her as a captive in need of rescue. Others whispered she'd gone native, become a squaw who'd forgotten her Christian upbringing. "Let them talk," Emily said, sorting through the fabric Ruth had brought. She'd begun work on a dress. Not white, for she was no innocent bride, but a deep blue that reminded her of the evening sky over the mountains. "Talk has a way of turning to action out here," Ruth warned. "There's a new marshal in Copper Springs, name of Jacob Fletcher. He's been asking questions about you." Dakota's face darkened. "I know this name. He rode with the soldiers who burned my village." "Then you know he's dangerous." Ruth's weathered face was grave. "He's got a particular hatred for Apache, lost his brother in a raid, though he never mentions his brother was caught stealing horses from a peaceful band." The news cast a shadow over their small paradise, but Emily refused to let fear rule her days. She continued her work on the dress, her garden, her lessons in tracking and hunting. Dakota taught her to shoot his rifle, praising her steady hand and keen eye. One morning, as the first snow dusted the peaks, Emily woke feeling queasy. She attributed it to the venison they'd eaten the night before, but when the nausea returned the next morning and the next, a different possibility dawned. She said nothing to Dakota at first, hugging the secret close as she counted days and observed her body's changes. But he was too observant, too attuned to her moods and movements. "You are different," he said one evening as she pushed food around her plate. "Sick?" Emily met his concerned gaze, her hand moving instinctively to her still flat stomach. "Not sick, with child." The expression on his face was worth her days of secret-keeping. Shock melting into joy so profound it transformed his usually stoic features. He was beside her in an instant, dropping to his knees, his hands hovering over her belly as if afraid to touch. "Truth," he whispered in Apache. "Truth," she confirmed, covering his hands with hers and pressing them against her. He made a sound, half laugh, half sob, and gathered her into his arms, murmuring words in Apache she didn't recognize but understood from their tone. Prayers of thanksgiving, promises of protection, expressions of love too deep for any language to fully capture. That night, he was even more tender with her than usual, treating her as if she were made of precious porcelain. Emily finally had to laugh, pushing him onto his back and straddling his hips. "I'm pregnant, not broken," she teased. "Apache women are warriors, remember? Surely they don't stop being so just because they carry children." "My mother rode horses until the day I was born," he admitted, his hands settling on her hips. "But you are my heart now, both of you. I cannot help but want to wrap you in softest furs and hide you from all harm. The only soft fur I want wrapped around me is yours," Emily said, leaning down to kiss him. Their joy was shattered 3 days later when riders appeared at the edge of their clearing. Marshal Fletcher and 4 deputized men, all armed, all wearing expressions of grim determination. "Mrs. Patterson," Fletcher called, his voice carrying the authority of law and the undertone of malice. "I'm here to rescue you from your captivity." Emily emerged from the cabin, Dakota close behind her. She donned her best dress and pinned her hair up properly, every inch the respectable white woman except for the Apache beading she wore at her throat. A gift from Dakota. "I'm not captive, Marshal. I'm exactly where I choose to be." Fletcher's eyes narrowed. "Ma'am, you've clearly been influenced by your time here. Stockholm Syndrome, they call it. You can't be expected to think clearly after what you've endured." "What I've endured," Emily said clearly, "was being sold by my father to pay his debts. What I've found is a home and a husband who treats me with respect and love." "Husband?" Fletcher's laugh was ugly. "No Christian marriage is valid between a white woman and a savage. You're living in sin, and I'm here to remove you from this situation before—" His eyes dropped to her midsection, where her hand had moved protectively. "Dear God, you're breeding with it." The slur made Emily's blood boil, but before she could respond, Dakota stepped forward. "You will leave. Now." Fletcher's hand moved to his gun. "You're wanted for the murder of 6 U.S. soldiers. Savage. I could shoot you where you stand and collect the bounty." "Those soldiers killed women and children," Emily said fiercely. "They burned his village, murdered his family. That's not how the law sees it." Fletcher's smile was cold. "Here's what's going to happen. You're coming with us, Mrs. Patterson. He can surrender and face trial, or he can die here. Either way, you're leaving." "No." Emily moved to stand firmly beside Dakota. "I won't go. You'll have to drag me, and I'll fight every step. I'll tell everyone who'll listen that you're kidnapping me, that I'm here by choice. I'll stand up in any court and swear that I love this man, that I carry his child willingly. No court would listen to a woman so clearly corrupted." Fletcher spat. "But perhaps your father would like to know what's become of his daughter. My father sold me. He has no say in my life now." "Perhaps not, but he has debts, Mrs. Patterson. Significant debts to some rather unpleasant men. Men who might be interested to know that the daughter he sold for a pittance is living with an Apache who must have accumulated quite a bit from his raids on Army payrolls." The threat hung in the air. Emily felt Dakota tense beside her, ready for violence. She caught his hand, squeezing hard. "1 week," she said suddenly. "Give me 1 week to put affairs in order, and I'll come to town to speak with you properly." Fletcher's eyes narrowed. "You'll run? Where would we go? You know these mountains. You'd track us easily." Emily kept her voice steady, reasonable. 1 week, Marshal? Surely you can grant a woman that courtesy." After a long moment, Fletcher nodded. 1 week, but I'll have men watching the trails. Try to run, and I'll assume he's kidnapped you against your will and act accordingly." They rode away, but their presence lingered like smoke. Dakota pulled Emily inside, his face carved from stone. "You will not go to him," he said flatly. "Of course not. But we needed them gone so we could think. Emily paced the small cabin. Ruth, she'll help us. She must know trails they don't watch. No. Dakota caught her shoulders. I won't have you fleeing into the mountains with child. I will go to town. Surrender. They will take me away, but you will be safe. Don't you dare! Emily's voice cracked with fury. Don't you dare talk about leaving me. We're family now. You, me, and this baby. We stay together or not at all. Emily, would you have let Ayanna face danger alone? Would you have abandoned her to save yourself? His hands gentled on her shoulders. You know I would not. Then don't ask me to be less than she was. I'm your wife. Dakota, Apache or white, Christian or not. I'm your wife, and I won't let them tear us apart. That night, as snow began to fall in earnest, they held each other close and made plans. Ruth arrived before dawn, grim-faced and armed. Heard about Fletcher's visit, she said without preamble. Got 2 options for you. There's a missionary couple 2 days north who help mixed couples. They could perform a Christian ceremony, make it legal in the white world. Or there's an old mining camp 3 days south, abandoned but sheltered. You could winter there, have the baby come spring. Neither, Emily said firmly. I'm done running, done hiding. We've committed no crime except loving each other. I won't raise my child in fear. Then what? Ruth asked. Emily looked at Dakota, saw her own determination reflected in his eyes. Then we fight, not with guns or knives, but with truth, with courage, with the radical act of simply refusing to be separated. Fletcher won't back down easy, Ruth warned. Neither will we. Emily's hand rested on her belly where new life grew. My mother used to say that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply stand still and refuse to be moved. So that's what we'll do. Stand our ground. Together. The snow fell harder, blanketing the mountains in white. But inside the cabin, warmed by fire and love and fierce determination, Emily and Dakota prepared for the battle ahead. Not a battle of violence, but one of principle. They would demand that the world see them not as savage and captive, but as husband and wife, as family, as proof that love could bridge even the deepest divides. And if the world refused to see, then they would make it look one neighbor, one friend, one heart at a time. The week passed with agonizing swiftness. Emily and Dakota worked together to prepare the cabin for whatever might come, storing extra food, securing the animals, hiding what few valuables they possessed. But when the 7th dawn broke, Emily stood ready in her blue dress, her mother's ring on her finger, her father's old Bible in her hands. You don't go alone, Dakota said, checking his rifle. They'll shoot you the moment we enter town. Then I die beside you. Better than living without you. Emily touched his face, memorizing every line. You won't die, and neither will I. We're going to walk into that town with our heads high, and we're going to speak truth so clearly that even stones would weep to hear it. Ruth met them at the tree line with her husband Joseph, a weathered Apache man with kind eyes. We stand with you, she said simply, whatever comes. The ride to Copper Springs felt both endless and too brief. As they entered the town's main street, Emily saw faces appear at windows. Doors crack open. Word spread quickly. The captive woman had returned, and she'd brought the savage with her. Marshal Fletcher waited outside his office, flanked by armed men. But there were others gathered too. The minister, Reverend Thomas, the doctor's wife, Mrs. Hartley, even some of the miners who'd traded with Dakota over the years. Mrs. Patterson, Fletcher called. Step away from the Apache and come here. My name is Emily Dakota, she replied clearly, dismounting with Dakota's help. And I stand with my husband. A murmur ran through the crowd. Fletcher's face darkened. There is no legal marriage between you. You've been deceived, corrupted. I have the marriage certificate right here. Ruth interrupted, producing a document. Married 3 days ago by Reverend Samuel Blackwood at the mission. Legal and binding in the territory of Arizona and the eyes of God. Emily felt Dakota's surprise. They'd made no such trip. But she kept her face calm as Ruth winked at her. Apparently, the older woman had taken matters into her own hands. That's not possible, Fletcher sputtered. I had men watching. Your men watch the main trails." Joseph spoke for the first time, his English careful but clear. "Apache know many paths white men never see." "It doesn't matter." Fletcher's voice rose. "He's still wanted for murder, still a savage who defended his village against murderers." Emily stepped forward, opening the Bible. "I have here letters, Marshall, written by a soldier named James Fletcher to his brother Jacob." "Your brother, I believe." Fletcher went very still. "Ruth brought them to me." Emily continued. "Found them in the belongings of a soldier who died of fever at her trading post. Would you like me to read them aloud? The parts where he brags about what they did to the Apache women? Where he describes burning children alive? Where he mentions taking trophies? Those are lies. Your brother's own hand, Marshall, his own words." Emily's voice rang clear. "Dakota defended his people against monsters. If that's murder in your law, then your law is unjust. You can't threaten an officer of the law." "I threaten no one. I offer only truth." Emily looked around at the gathered crowd. "All of you know me now. You've heard the story of the mail-order bride sold to an Apache. But do you know the whole truth? Do you know my father took money from a man who trades in human misery? Do you know I was told I'd be a housekeeper for a widower, only to be delivered like cattle to the highest bidder?" Mrs. Hartley stepped forward. "Is this true, dear?" "Every word, and yet in what you might call captivity. I found something I'd never known in civilization. Respect, kindness, love." Emily's hand moved to her belly. "I carry this man's child by choice, with joy. I stand beside him by choice, with pride. If that makes me fallen in your eyes, so be it. I would rather fall into love than stand in hatred." "Pretty words." Fletcher snarled. "But they change nothing. He comes with me, or what, Marshall?" Reverend Thomas stepped forward, his aged face stern. "Will you shoot an unarmed man in the street, widow a pregnant woman? Show us all what kind of law you represent." "I represent justice. You represent vengeance," the Reverend corrected. "And vengeance belongs to the Lord, not to men with badges and grudges." More murmurs from the crowd. Emily sensed the tide beginning to turn. "Furthermore," Ruth added loudly, "I've sent word to the territorial governor about our marshal's interesting approach to law enforcement, about the bribes he takes from the saloon, about the Apache girls who've gone missing near his cabin, about—" "Enough!" Fletcher's hand moved toward his gun, but stopped as several rifles were raised, not from his men, but from the crowd. Miners, ranchers, even some townswomen held weapons. "Seems the good people of Copper Springs are tired of your version of justice." "Marshal," Ruth observed. Fletcher looked around, calculating odds. His deputies seemed uncertain, unwilling to fire on their neighbors. Finally, his shoulders slumped. "This isn't over," he said to Dakota. "That bounty remains. Other men will come. Let them come." Dakota spoke for the first time. "I defend my family, always. Get out of our town. Fletcher!" Dr. Hartley emerged from his office. "I've tolerated your brutality because I feared for my family, but no more. These people," he gestured to Emily and Dakota, "have shown more courage and honor than you ever have. They stay. You go." The crowd's agreement was vocal and unanimous. Fletcher looked at his deputies, but they were already stepping away, badges dropping to the dirt, with a final venomous glare. The marshal mounted his horse and rode out, leaving silence in his wake. Then Mrs. Hartley was embracing Emily, and others pressed forward, not all friendly, but curious, human. The doctor insisted on examining her, confirming her pregnancy was progressing well. The Reverend blessed their marriage certificate. "Apparently real," Ruth confirmed. "Obtained through a friend who'd forged their presence at the mission." As the sun set, Emily and Dakota stood in the same street where she'd first seen him, where her journey into fear had begun. Now it was transformed into something else. Not quite acceptance, but possibility. "We can't stay here," Dakota said quietly as they prepared to leave. "Too many memories. Too much hatred still." "I know." Emily leaned into his strength. "But we don't have to run either. We'll go where we choose, when we choose. Ruth approached with a final gift, a bundle wrapped in bright cloth. From the Apache women at the mission, she said. They heard your story. Emily unwrapped it carefully, gasping at the contents. A blanket, woven in intricate patterns of red and blue and white. A wedding blanket, like Dakota had described. How? Word travels. Ruth smiled. They said any woman brave enough to stand beside one of their warriors deserved proper recognition. There's more. They offer you a place with them, if you want it. A small band, living peaceful near the mission. Mixed couples, like you, building something new. Emily looked at Dakota, saw the longing in his eyes, not for the past that was lost, but for a future with people who might understand. After the baby comes, she decided, we'll stay in our cabin through winter, then decide. That night, wrapped in their wedding blanket before the fire, Emily marveled at the journey that had brought them here. From captive to wife, from fear to love, from isolation to the possibility of community. No regrets? Dakota asked. His hand splayed protectively over her growing belly. Only one, Emily admitted. His body tensed. What? That I can't go back and tell that terrified girl on the train that everything would be all right, that what seemed like the end was actually the beginning. She turned in his arms. That sometimes we find home in the most unexpected places. He kissed her then, deep and sure, and she knew that whatever came next, winter storms or spring flowers, acceptance or prejudice, joy or sorrow, they would face it together. Two souls who'd found each other across impossible odds, building a bridge between worlds with nothing but love and courage and the stubborn refusal to let go. Outside, snow began to fall again, blanketing the mountains in pristine white. But inside, warmed by fire and love and hope, Emily and Dakota began the rest of their lives, not as captive and captor, not as white and Apache, but simply as two people who'd chosen each other against all odds, and in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Winter held the mountains in its icy grip as Emily's time approached. The snow piled high against the cabin walls, creating a cocoon of white that isolated them from the world beyond. Dakota had become even more protective as her belly swelled, barely allowing her to lift anything heavier than a cooking pot. I carried water for 8 months with you, Emily reminded him one morning as he rushed to take the bucket from her hands. Apache women are strong, remember? My woman is strongest, he agreed, but took the bucket anyway. Also most stubborn. The baby came during a blizzard that howled like all the spirits of the mountain. Emily had expected fear when the pains began, but instead felt a strange calm. Dakota had less composure, pacing the cabin like a caged wolf until she ordered him to sit beside her. Ruth arrived just as the contractions grew serious, having somehow made it through the storm. Knew it would be today, she said matter-of-factly, shedding her snow-covered coat. Had a feeling. The labor was long but not complicated. Emily gripped Dakota's hands, drawing strength from his presence. He whispered to her in Apache, prayers, encouragements, promises to their coming child. When their daughter finally arrived, screaming her fury at the cold world, Dakota wept openly. She's perfect, Ruth declared, cleaning the baby and wrapping her in soft blankets. Got her mama's spirit already. Listen to those lungs. Emily, exhausted but euphoric, watched Dakota hold their daughter for the first time. His massive hands cradled her tiny form with infinite gentleness, his face transformed by wonder. What will you name her? Ruth asked. Emily and Dakota exchanged glances. They'd discussed this through the long winter evenings, wanting something that honored both their worlds. Sarah, Emily said, after my mother, Sarah Morningstar. The Apache name means she who brings light. Sarah Morningstar, Dakota repeated, touching his daughter's impossibly small fingers. Perfect name for perfect gift. Spring came slowly to the mountains, but with it came change. The small band of mixed families Ruth had mentioned sent representatives. A Cherokee man married to an Irish woman, an Apache woman with her Mexican husband. They spoke of their community near the old mission, where Father Miguel blessed unions the rest of the world condemned, where children grew up speaking multiple languages and wearing their mixed heritage with pride. It's not paradise. The Cherokee man, Robert Stonecrow, warned, "We still face prejudice, still struggle, but we face it together." Emily looked around their small cabin, at the cradle Dakota had carved, at her garden beginning to green, at the life they'd built against all odds. It had become home, but she could see the longing in Dakota's eyes when their visitors spoke of community, of children for Sarah to grow up alongside, of elders who could teach her the old ways. "After harvest," she decided, "we'll come see." The journey with a baby was challenging, but they managed. The community, really just a collection of small farms scattered around an old mission, welcomed them warmly. Emily was amazed to find a schoolhouse where a former professor's daughter taught children of all colors, a trading post run by a black man and his Navajo wife, fields where different traditions of farming blended into something new and resilient. "We're building something here," Father Miguel told them over dinner. The old priest had kind eyes and gnarled hands that had blessed hundreds of unions others called unholy. Not Mexican, not American, not Indian, but something new. A place where love matters more than blood. They stayed for 2 weeks, helping with planting, sharing meals, watching Sarah interact with other babies. Dakota came alive in ways Emily had never seen, speaking Apache with the elders, teaching younger men traditional hunting methods, finding pieces of himself he'd thought lost forever. On their last night, there was a celebration. Emily wore her blue dress, Dakota his best shirt. They danced to a mixture of music, Mexican guitars, Apache drums, Irish fiddles, while Sarah slept in her cradle, watched over by a dozen adopted grandmothers. "Could you be happy here?" Dakota asked as they swayed together. "I could be happy anywhere with you." Emily replied, "But yes, I think we could build a good life here. Sarah could grow up knowing all parts of herself." They returned to their cabin to prepare for the move. As Emily packed their few belongings, she found the journal she'd kept throughout her journey. Reading back through the entries, from the terrified girl on the train to the woman she'd become, she barely recognized herself. A letter arrived from Cedar Creek, forwarded through Ruth. Emily almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. "Dear Emily," her father's shaky handwriting began, "I heard what became of you. The merchant Thornton was arrested for fraud. Seems he was selling women to whoever paid highest, not matching them with respectable positions as promised. I know it doesn't undo what I done, but wanted you to know I've quit the drink. Your stepmother left me, took what little we had. I'm working the miller's farm now, trying to make amends. I don't expect forgiveness. Just wanted you to know I remember Catherine every day, and I'm sorry I failed the daughter she loved. If you ever have children, tell them their grandfather hopes they inherited their grandmother's strength, not his weakness. Samuel Patterson." Emily read it twice, then handed it to Dakota. "What do I do with this? What does your heart say?" She thought for a long moment. "Maybe someday I'll write back, when I'm ready. For now." She tucked the letter into her journal. "For now, we have our own family to tend." They made the move in early autumn, arriving at the mission community with a wagon full of possessions and hearts full of hope. The cabin they were given was larger than their mountain home, with real glass windows and a wooden floor. Other families helped them settle in, bringing food, furniture, and friendship. Sarah thrived in the communal environment, passed from arms to arms, hearing lullabies in a dozen languages. Emily learned to make tortillas from her Mexican neighbors, taught Apache women her mother's recipe for apple preserves. Dakota helped build a new barn, his strength and skill earning respect from men who judged character over color. There were challenges, travelers who sneered at their mixed community, officials who questioned their marriages, moments when the weight of being between worlds pressed heavy. But there was joy too, harvest celebrations where all traditions blended, children playing together without knowledge of the hatred that divided their parents' peoples. Quiet evenings when Emily and Dakota could sit on their porch, watching Sarah toddle after butterflies, marveling at the life they'd built. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, Emily stood in her garden watching Dakota play with Sarah. He was teaching her to track rabbits, her chubby fingers trying to copy his gestures, both of them laughing when she got distracted by a flower. "Mama," Sarah called, running to Emily on unsteady legs. "Papa show bunny." Emily scooped her up, kissing her brown cheek. "Did he now? Was it a big bunny?" "Big, big." Sarah spread her arms wide, nearly overbalancing. Dakota joined them, his arm settling around Emily's waist. "She has good eyes. We'll be fine tracker, or maybe a teacher like Mrs. Goldman," Emily suggested, "or a trader like Ruth." "She can be anything." "Yes," Dakota agreed, pressing a kiss to Emily's temple. "In this place, she can be anything." As twilight gathered, they went inside for dinner. Emily lit candles while Dakota settled Sarah in her high chair. The simple domestic scene filled her with contentment so profound it almost ached. She thought of that frightened girl on the train, sold and abandoned, certain her life was ending. How could she have known it was only beginning? "What you thinking?" Dakota asked, noticing her distant expression. "How grateful I am," Emily said simply, "for the journey that brought me to you, for our daughter, for this life we've made. I came west expecting servitude and found freedom, expected loneliness and found love, expected an ending and found a beginning." "My Emily Rose," Dakota said softly, catching her hand. "My warrior woman, you save me too. Give me reason to live again, to hope again, to love again." "We saved each other," Emily corrected, squeezing his fingers, "and built something new from the ashes of our old lives." Later, after Sarah was asleep and they lay wrapped in each other's arms, Emily thought about all the women who'd made similar journeys, sold, traded, sent west to uncertain fates. Some found misery, some found death, but some, like her, found unexpected love and the courage to claim it despite all obstacles. The West was still wild, still dangerous, still divided by prejudice and hate. But in small pockets like their mission community, something new was growing. A future where love mattered more than race, where families came in all colors, where children like Sarah could grow up belonging fully to all their inheritances. It wasn't the life Emily had imagined as a girl in Missouri. It was harder in some ways, simpler in others, richer in all the ways that mattered. And as she drifted toward sleep, safe in Dakota's arms, listening to coyotes sing to the stars, she knew she wouldn't change a single step of the journey that had brought her home. Thank you for joining us around the Wild West Campfire to hear Emily and Dakota's story. Where are you listening from tonight? Drop a comment below and let us know. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more tales of love, courage, and adventure from the American frontier. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Did it touch your heart? What would you have done in Emily's place? Share your reflections below and become part of our campfire community.